Good evening, everyone. Call the meeting to order. And Brenda, if you'd take roll for us.
Sure. Board Member Brisky.
Present.
Board Member Freeman. Board Member Jolie.
Present.
Board Member Mercier. Board Member Ridley.
Present.
Council Member Russell.
Present.
Mayor Sierra. Council Member Ward.
Present.
Vice Chair Hubernick. Chair Moore.
Present. Virtually. Feel so alone. There's no one out here in cyber world with me. Great. Next on, we'll move to item 3, approval of the minutes of the April 9th meeting. Could I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any edits, comments? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, minutes carry. Next up is public forum. Brenda, do we have anyone from the public to speak with us tonight?
We do not.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item 5. Bear with me, technical difficulty. All right, new business item 5A, award of contract for services for the lead service line replacement project. And Sarah, I think you've got the floor.
I do. All right. So share my screen there. Not getting the option. I'll have to scroll through. It's not giving me the option to make a full screen. So good evening, everyone. So we are going to talk about the lead service line replacement construction contract. This has been a long time coming. I think it's been on everybody's radar for the past several months. And so tonight I will present that contract. We also have our program managers here with Hazen and Sawyer, so Steve Price and Jasmine Gamboa, who can help answer any questions that I can answer tonight. So background and history, you've all seen this timeline. We are now headed towards the end of the timeline, which is to begin construction. So tonight is consideration of the contract that is planned to go to City Council next week. And then if successfully approved, then we would kick off construction for lead service line replacement in June of this year. So our program goal is to replace all lead and galvanized steel service lines within 5 years. With this contract coming tonight and kind of where we are with our negotiation with AGL, the contractor, we think we can do that in 3 years. But that's what the inventory, so this is what the inventory looks like. There's 19% that are either lead or assumed lead. That's 19% of 11,000 service connections. And then we also include in the number the 7% unknown to get us close to that 3,000 lead service lines that we are predicting that are in the system. So the scope of work for this program or for this project is to physically verify the lead service line material for all properties built before 1960. So we are going to pothole and physically verify every property that has a pre-1960 date, and we're going to do that this year. So that we have then cost certainty and inventory certainty before we finalize kind of a full program cost. Our goal is to replace about 3,000 lead service lines, and we plan to engage with customers as well as install meter plates for the flat rate and inside set meters. The graphic on the screen is just a reminder of the lead service line replacement process that we have provided in the past. So our selection process, we posted a request for proposals on January 18th of this year. We had 4 contractors that responded. We really only show 2 up here. So we have AGL and Miller. They had the closest and most competitive per lead service line cost of the 4 contractors that responded. The other two were way out of range, so we eliminated them pretty quickly. Based on the qualifications, AGL was selected before we saw the costs, and then we saw the costs, and they were the lowest of the four. They were also competitive. We have the Denver Water Apex comparison there. So that's what Denver Water contracted with Apex for this year for their replacement project. So we are replacement program. So we're actually a little bit under them as well. We also, as we were going through the negotiation process with AGL, we asked them if they could reduce their costs a little bit more if we had them as the sole contractor, and they said yes. So they reduced their per service line cost by another $400 on the single family residential. So this contract is for construction to start in June 2024. It would be an annual contract term with 2 renewals. The total program amount is estimated to be $28 million. We'd request a 10% staff managed contingency for $2.8 million for a total program authorization of about 30.9 million. And then on the right, that shows per calendar or by calendar year what those anticipated amounts were. So this year we would contract for 9.35 million, and that would cover the area that we're targeting, that north central zone in the city. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Curious why Denver Waters was about $1,000 higher. Was that traffic control? Did you hear anything from them why they thought it may have been higher than what we saw?
I'll turn to Jasmine and.
Yeah, so Denver Water releases 2 programs, one federal funding, one not, and they both have several contractors working in both programs. And so AGL's preference was if they could get the whole program, they'd offer more competitive pricing than what they're offering Denver because they get a smaller slice of the pie there. So
our understanding too is that they have, we're fortunate in the sense that Denver has their program going on right now, and they had more crews available that they didn't win the work for Denver, which makes them more competitive for our work because they have crews that are just waiting to get going. So we're the beneficiary of the fact that the Denver program is underway, and they didn't win one of the packages. So they had an idle crew that they're, ready to get going and gave us a more competitive pricing on, which is a benefit to the city.
Great.
So this price was per family household,
Yes.
per line?
Per line.
Okay.
Yep. And that's kind of like a base, base replacement. So if there's not a lot of traffic control, there's not a lot of landscaping that needs to be repaired. It's kind of that bare bones, just replace the line. And this is, and I think I mentioned it, but that also includes the meter pit for those that are flat rate or have an inside set meter.
Yeah. So it's a typical installation, but we would expect that some will be higher, and based on the complications associated with the installation. We will say that if there's really complicated landscaping, that's something that this program is not anticipating replacing. We don't anticipate disturbing a lot of front landscaping, but if we put in a meter pit on a flat rate, we're going to have to, and then we'll restore it to either sod or seed condition, and then the homeowner would come back and do whatever repairs to that system that they want to make, or that landscaping that they want to make.
Are you relocating indoor meters on lead service lines, or only if they're flat rate right now?
Now, if we have a indoor meter on a lead service line, our intention is to move it outside with a meter pit as part of this. And then the AMI program will come in at the same time and do the meters. And so if the AMI program is installed on an inside meter set, then what we'll do is we'll just reinstall it back on the outside meter set.
Have we worked with AGL before?
We specifically have not worked with AGL, but they are one of Denver's contractors. And so Denver has experience. They have experience doing this exact work in the city of Denver. And from my understanding, and Steve can probably contribute to this, that they're happy with their work and they're one of their go-to contractors. Is that correct?
That is correct, and they've also done some work for the city of Aurora, so they come highly qualified.
And do we know how many complaints there were from residents?
We do not.
Yeah, we don't actually. But we probably, I'm assuming we can get that information. But the thing is, they have experience with it. And so we're not bringing in someone new who hasn't gone through this process, hasn't like suffered through some of the growing pains of developing this type of program. So again, we think we're gonna benefit from that. And why it's also, more cost effective.
Right, and I was really impressed with how you protected citizens and the requirements. I just wanted us to make sure that they follow through on what we're requiring them to do in the contract.
Yeah, and that's the plan. And so, we have that, if you recall, we have that 4-time notification of the intention. And if a homeowner does not follow through after 4 times of notification, we'll replace the city side of it, and then we'll put that device in between the old lead service line that's still going in the house and the new copper line to protect the rest of the system. And then we'll track it in case that property changes hands in the future. So all that's in place to implement so that we can minimize the risk of causing any kind of undue difficulty for our customers to the degree that we can, because we're, this is a disruptive process, but it gets them a better system in the end.
So do we anticipate we're gonna have to take out concrete sidewalks or anything like that? And that'll be a cost to the city, right?
Yeah, the way they do this is because typically where the water line is in the street, it's under the asphalt section. And so what they do is they cut like a 4-foot by 4-foot square out of the asphalt section. They dig down, and then that's where they tunnel in to pull the new line through, and then they make that connection at that 4-foot square is directly above the actual water line in the street. So what we're left with is we have a 4-foot by 4-foot patch in the asphalt. And what I was just talking to Director Rochelle about coordinating on their street work. So they do their mill and overlay work, they do their slurry seal work, is to ensure that we're not, to the best of our ability, we're not doing this work right after they slurry seal something 9 months later. And so I know there's ongoing coordination on that. We talked about it again this morning. I just talked to Victor about it a half an hour ago because I want to make sure that this is sequential in the sense that we're not tearing up brand new streets.
Thank you.
I think
Kaylin has got her hand raised. Kaylin, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Sorry.
No problem.
So my question is, and I have a feeling we've already answered it, but I just wanted a reminder. So how do we know that homes, the service lines to homes, that were built in 1960 and later are not lead service lines or galvanized steel?
Yeah, so I can answer some of that, and Steve can correct me if I'm wrong here, but so the requirements for the material used for service lines changed in 1950. And so there's a buffer there that we feel comfortable with, the 10-year buffer that lead was not used through 1960. We've also got data from Denver that they have not found lead in post-1960 properties.
or post 1950, right? I mean, very
It's been very few
few
between
post 1950.
1950 to 1955. And this is also guidance from the state. So the state has said that 1960 is what they're using as a threshold as well. So we feel comfortable with that. We haven't come across anything, and neither has Denver. you know, if that changes, we would then require additional potholing to verify.
Okay, I'm just wondering because my house was built in 1960, so it's like right there on that cutoff.
Yeah.
So, and also if customers are concerned about it, can they get it tested to see if there is lead service lines, or will that be part of your guys' process?
I think post 1960, we can talk about we've actually talked about this internally, is if there are people who are truly concerned about post 1960, the material, if we have some kind of an on-call pothole contract where we do one-off, you know, checks here and there for people who are concerned about it. The question becomes if we get, you know, 1,000 or 2,000 people who are post 1960 and who want to do it. It's not funded to that degree right now. But if there's like, you know, occasional people who really just want to verify for whatever reason, that's a program that we can consider. I think once we remove all of the ones that we know are lead, and then continue to just further gain certainty and clarity in terms of every service line. But there's going to be a point in time where it's not really money well spent because if everything's coming back post 1955 is not lead, then it's a sign of how the city was built and the contractors that were building and the materials that they were using. So I think when we test 1950 to 1960, if we're not seeing, you know, more than a handful of examples of it, then I think we would go with the state guidance of it's post 1960 where it's not lead. But if there's a true desire, we can look at that down the road.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? Are
I
there any
just
other
had
questions?
Real quick, I just had one question. Are they holding their price for 3 years?
Yes, they are.
Just kind of surprising, why are they doing that? I can't get any of our service providers in Denver to hold anything for more than 24 months. So I'm kind of surprised for 3 years because our market is so volatile.
So I think, you know, because they had a crew that was already staffed and available through the Denver Water program, because they just came off in 2023 off of a portion of that. I think they still are working within Denver this year, but they didn't get as big of a chunk as they had expected. So they had staffed up, and so they have crews ready and available. And I think they want certainty in that staffing for the next 3 years. We've got, you know, a program in place. We can provide that certainty for them. So that's why they're willing
And
to.
how long is the Denver program going on?
15
Another 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're just actually the fortunate beneficiary of the fact that they
Yeah.
staffed up and they didn't get
We're
as much
piggybacking
work out of
off
Denver.
Yeah.
And so they can pre-purchase the materials. I mean, it's all the same materials. So they can pre-purchase all that to ensure that they have price certainty on their materials. And then it just really becomes labor. And at that point in time, they've already staffed up the labor. And it was more important for them to maintain a force through the potential for future Denver work than to, you know, decrease their staff and then potentially have to ramp it back up in the future.
I just want to make sure we weren't going to get some subpar subs or something like that, and quality. You know, we'd have depreciated quality on that. So
yeah, I would say we dug in a lot on that.
Okay.
And I think it really just comes down to every now and then we get fortunate circumstances. I mean, it seems like so often we're bidding things and we're just competing. And this circumstance ended up benefiting all of us with the pricing. And so there's a lot of good aspects of this that I think will allow us to accelerate the program and get really good value for our customers.
thank you.
I have a question. If folks happen to have a situation where they have a service line break in an area that AGL is doing work, are we going to allow them to use the contractor and pay the difference? Or has that been brought up if they're right there and it just happens to be a failure?
You mean if it's a non-lead
If
service
it's,
line?
yeah, it's one that you probably didn't flag as post 1960, but they're out there.
I think, I would probably leave that to the homeowner and AGL outside of this contract if they wanted to do that. I think if we start opening that up, it becomes a bit more challenging, especially considering we have so much federal funding tied to this program, and this program is federally funded. So I don't necessarily want to open even the possibility of those doors, but if they want to do stuff on their own, I mean, if the contractor's there, they can, nothing stops them from going up and talking to them.
Gotcha.
So how does this impact not being able to enter into a multi-year contract?
So that's why you see it as three different amounts. And so, the way we've structured it is how we've structured some of our other, some of our on-calls, where we have the initial year, there's an initial year estimate, and then there's, option years. So that's how we've structured this same thing. So it's program certainty, understanding that it takes year to year appropriation of a council. So what we're approving here is the overall program approach, realizing that each year we're gonna have to get the approval for that option.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Because we talked about that exact issue.
We did.
All right, can I get a motion for item 5A as written? Right there.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we vote? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, hearing no opposition, motion carries. Great, thank you. It's nice seeing the progress just keep going. Moving on to item 5B. And looks like Ben will take over, Alexenberg.
Yep, so Ben, come on up to the table. So Ben is our new EI&C manager at the Allen plant. Up until Ben starting with the city, we didn't have a dedicated EI&C manager. So that's electric integration and controls manager at the Allen plant. And it was definitely a need, and so Ben's been with us for about 6 months. Is that 6 months? And has been moving forward a lot of our needed projects related to the controls at the water plant, the electrical projects at the water plant, addressing a lot of outdated systems that we need to upgrade. And so he's going to present tonight our plan for that and some contracts to fix some of those things too.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ben.
Great, thank you. First of all, I'd like to start with the why and a couple of the what's in terms of PLCs. I know not a lot of people understand what a programmable logic controller is. It's basically just a computer that we have out on the plant floor and is designated for industrial controls. This is how the type of computer we use to control our processes. So there's many different things wrapped around all of these PLCs. It's just the brains of our operation. So there's other particular pieces of equipment that we will be upgrading as well. So our background on this is that the things that are wrapped around those is using electrical instrumentation and controls. Instrumentation being pressure, temperature, flow measurement devices. All right, so the reason we're replacing the PLC is because they're obsolete. Most of them are 25 years old and no longer supported and no longer available. So if we lose one, we are at high risk of losing some processes at the plant. We do have spares at the plant, but they're just as old as the ones that are in place. So, with that said, we are intending to upgrade all of the PLCs in the plant. We've already upgraded one, which is our filter PLC, and that was the start. We finished that 2 years ago. So we're going to do the other 9 that are operating all the rest of the processes at the plant. So also, we want to be able to upgrade instrumentation. And before we can upgrade the instrumentation, we have to upgrade to the newer technology PLCs so that the newer technology instrumentation will work properly. All right, so our scope of work is to upgrade and repair all the control panels and instrumentation at the plant, right? Plus the wiring systems that are involved, because the wiring systems are old and need replaced, just like they get brittle and so forth. And we need to put new cabling in, so they'll last another 25 years. All right. So part of this replacement is not only the PLCs themselves, but it's for the software that operates them. And so with that, it's not only the PLC software, but HMI software upgrades in terms of versioning for the actual SCADA system that we utilize to operate the plant.
HMI is human machine interface.
Yes,
That's what
thank you.
HMI stands for.
Sorry, there's a lot of acronyms in this space, so please stop me if I miss one. Appreciate that. Thank you. So in replacing some of that software and upgrading software, we have to have programming, of course. All right, so we will be doing a number of different upgrades in terms of programming in order to make these work and basically bring everything into the 21st century. All right, so what this also provides us is an opportunity to do some process optimization. All right, this is a rare opportunity, we don't get very often because we do run 24/7. And we don't want to interrupt processes as they're operating. So while we're upgrading the equipment, we want to sit down and say, where can we optimize processes? Optimization is instrumentation upgrades. It's new process procedures. It's the ability to see more with new instrumentation so that the operations department can bring software, like I said, into the 21st century and be able to provide, cleaner water and a little bit better quality water where we can't do that because of aging equipment now. All right, so some of the project benefits, the main ones that we have, number one is we have a requirement to comply with EPA cybersecurity requirements and recommendations. This is very, very important. They will be working with us for over the next 3 years to make sure that all of our cybersecurity in our what we call operations technology environment or the SCADA environment is compliant with like I said, their recommendations so we can keep the hackers out. We'll be doing a lot of that work over the next 2 to 3 years in order to try to keep these people out of our systems. We've heard a lot of things in the media in the recent past. We want to make sure that we're not one of those. So we would be putting a lot of concentration into that. All right, as we said before, we're replacing obsolete control system components, and that brings new components into play. We were able to stock fresh components on the shelf or have them available at a distributor that in case we have one fail, we can give it all. We can grab it, put it right in when we need it. All right, again, optimizing operations. That gives our operators the chance to have better tools in order to operate the plant the way they need to when we put them in. And then what that results in overall and ultimately is the increased reliability of the water treatment plant. All right. So in our selection process, we selected Huffman Engineering for this project, and the reason we selected them is because they have, and there's the subs that they have in this are very knowledgeable about water treatment plant. All of these companies right here have on-call contracts with us already. So they're very, very, very familiar with what we're doing and able to complete this in a short amount of time and at a better budget than some of the other contractors that we had bidding. All right, so some of these Huffman, they did the successful upgrade of our filter interface panel that I mentioned already that we did in 2022. They did a darn good job. So that's why we're bringing them back. And then just to make sure that we dot I's and cross T's, we had a third party review Huffman's quote and all of the subs quotes as well that went into that to make sure that everything was included. We didn't miss anything. And it came out with flying colors in that review. All right, so our contract summary, we have 3 phases of this contract. Phase 1 is what we're asking for approval today, and that is to start parts procurement and construction of our control panels, and to start programming as well. That's what it's going to, the only thing that's going to be entailed in the first year. We have 1 panel that will be installed, and that's all that we're going to be able to do, and it's a small one, and we can get that in very, very quickly. Phase 2, which will be the second year, will be continuation of panel construction and to start installation of the rest of the panels at the plant. Phase 3 is the final completion of installation and testing, user acceptance testing, to make sure that all of the systems that we've upgraded and optimized and installed are operating exactly the way they're supposed to. So there'll be a pretty rigorous user acceptance testing process put in place for that. All right, any questions?
So before we move on to questions, the last thing I'll add to this is, if you recall, in 2020, when we first did the master plan, I think it was the first time I was talking to the council and the board about some of our immediate vulnerabilities. The filter interface panel was the first one of those primary issues. And if you recall, that's the one we had to go on to eBay to get the parts for, because the provider is no longer supported, and it's the computer brains of the filter process. And so we got that one upgraded and completed in 2022. And this is essentially the continuation of that process to bring them into the modern age. And so just a little background of, what part of the water system we've been talking about since day one that these upgrades address. It's that aspect. So thank you, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, have the supply chains caught up with the equipment you need to procure?
They are starting to do that, yes. Probably 2-3 years ago, we had certain parts that were out 2 years, sometimes 3 years, depending on, perfect example is the variable frequency drives we use. We could get those, but there's a computer interface card for communications to it we couldn't get. It took 2 years to get. So it would sit, we could buy the VFD, but it would sit for 2 years until we got the new card. But now that particular interface card, as an example, we can get in probably 4 months, right? So that's kind of indicative of all the rest of the components as well in the supply chain, is that we can get them in relatively short time, probably within, the harder ones within 6 months instead of being two years like it was before.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And you guys referenced the 2020 water system master plan. Where is that, or can I get a copy of that?
Do we have that posted online?
I've searched for it. I'm not a great Googler though,
Okay.
so.
I can email it to you.
That would be great. And then where's the staff training for this come into this piece, or is it separate from what you all will be asking
No,
for?
that'll come in at the end, right?
In that
As
third
we're working
phase?
through, yes, probably as we start to install these
Mhm.
particular panels, we will do our training for the operators and maintenance folks.
Is
As
that
we're
part of the
installing,
ask,
there's
though?
9 control panels that will be installed. So as we
Okay.
install those, we will do that training for that particular system.
Is that in-house or is it with the vendor? And
Vendor will do that.
And it's part of that cost though?
Yes.
Okay.
So how we're structured on this is, we have a single programmer that we work with. That's the same programmer that does all the programming at South Platte Renew. And what that does is it creates consistency across the 2 systems to make sure that we're maintaining a similar type of interface with all of this equipment that's used to run the system. And so that's Golden Automation. And so we do an optimal source every year with Golden Automation because we want to maintain consistency as we bring these things online. And so that's where most of that training will come in, is through the Golden Automation interface training with our operators and our maintenance staff on site. So this is one aspect of where Golden Automation is working with our systems. They've been modernizing our SCADA and interface HMI and PLC systems for the last 3.5 years since we started modernizing this system. So they're familiar, and they have an ongoing training relationship with our staff. And so that's more of that, if there's a slide that showed Huffman and then the two subcontracts. Those two subcontractors are also doing other work in the facility on other projects. Because it maintains consistency, not just with the Allen plant, but also with South Platte Renew, because we want those two systems to be similar.
Plus, we're, part of the contract is for them to provide the documentation, operations manuals, maintenance manuals, and so forth for all of that. So just to provide the reference for the operators as well. And they're available, as he mentioned, building automation is available just about at any time. They're in the plant usually once a week.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like no more questions. Can I get a motion for item 5B as written?
I move.
Great. And a sec. I'm sorry. Good. Did you get that, Brenda?
I did.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item 5C. And back to Sarah.
Thank you, man.
Okay, so this next item is professional service agreement renewal for our utility bill data processing, printing, and mailing services. So this is a quick presentation. So we contract with InfoSend. Contract amount is for $150,000. That's the same amount that we contracted for with them last year. Utility billing and processing, we process about 167 bills between the monthly billing that we do for utilities and public works for the stormwater and concrete fee, as well as the annual bills that we send to our connector district customers.
167,000.
Oh, did I say something?
You said just 167.
Oh, 167,000.
It's a little bit
It's on there.
bigger.
It's more than that, yeah.
I knew what you meant.
We also have room in this contract for up to 7 customer notifications. So those would be outside of the newsletters that are going in monthly currently. That's paid through communications. So we do have additional mailings that we could add into this contract. We anticipate with the online payment options going live very soon, I hope, to decrease the amount of mailed bills that we would have to send out, which might reduce this contract in the future. This is a 1-year contract renewal. It is an optimal source. And the reason for that is, one, we're still going through the billing system conversion. They were integral in formatting the new bill. We contracted with them initially. They were competitively selected back in 2013 and have provided excellent customer service since that point in time. So that I'll open it up for any questions.
So my question is, once Cogsdale is totally up and running, will we still have a need for them, or will everything be able to be done from the Cogsdale software?
We will still have a need for a vendor that can provide mailing services, yes, because my guess is we won't be going to paperless billing citywide or customer-wide anytime soon.
And our intention is once we get the new billing system in place and stabilized and running well, that this would be a contract that we could then go back out to the street to compete at some point down the road, since it has been the same vendor since 2013, the last time it was competitively bid. We don't like to wait that long, but we're in this transition phase and we don't want to do it right now. But as soon as we're stable with the new billing system, then we'll move to doing a competitive solicitation on this, and maybe they win it again, or maybe someone else comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Can I get a motion for item 5C as written?
The motion.
Second.
I'm sorry. Did I get a motion?
Yes, it was me.
Thank you, Marjan.
Thank
And a
you.
second?
Second.
All right. Further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed. All right. Great. Moving on to, oh, I'm sorry, motion carries. Moving on to item 5D.
Okay, that's me again. So this is the first amendment to the water tower lease agreements. So what this is, there's a lease on our Sherman Tower, which is shown in the small, small, can't use my pointer, looks like, star at the south end of the city to lease space on our Sherman Water Tower for up to 12 antennas. And this is for AT&T. The original lease was with Cellular One, which was AT&T. They currently have 11 antennas on the water tower, so this would allow for them to install one more. This original agreement was adopted by City Council on November 15th in 1993. That initial monthly rent was $500. This says annual rent increase. It's actually every 5 years. There's a rent increase, and that's tied to CPI in the Denver metro area. So I think it's around $1,500 a month right now. And then there was automatic renewals every 5 years. So each 5 year just renew for 20 years. So they approached us at the end of last year to renew this lease. So we crafted it as the first amendment to the water tower lease agreement. So this continues for that leasing, that communications equipment, and they do have that coverage area. So this is for cellular communications from Windermere to Colorado Boulevard, and then from Quincy to Orchard. So this eliminates the need for AT&T to install a separate antenna for their equipment. Like I said, they can lease, or they have space for up to 12 antennas. Tenant is now New Singular Wireless, also still AT&T. The initial monthly rent that we negotiated with them is now $3,000 a month, and we have requested and they approved an annual rent increase of 3%. So that really keeps up with historical inflation. And again, we would do automatic renewals every 5 years for 20 years. I'll open it up for any questions.
I'd just like to compliment Sarah on this one because she got the rent from $1,500 to $3,000 by working with them, and then also that 3% increase per year is a really competitive annual increase amount that not only keeps up with CPI, but off the consumer price index, but also a lot of times outpaces it, which means we should be in really good shape on this lease based on what we've seen for the last 20, 30 years as it relates to these types of leases. So credit to our work, putting a hard negotiation on AT&T.
So was this the 5 year renewal point? I mean, automatic 5 year renewal. So do we negotiate mostly the increase in rent at the 5 year point?
So we would not renegotiate the rent. That'd be an automatic. Every year it's going to go up by 3%, and we would assume that through the auto renewals all the way through that 20-year time frame.
But in the past, right, the $500 a month went on for a long time, right?
Yeah, so the $500 a month, that's where it started, and that lasted for 5 years, and then they did a look back at the CPI, and I couldn't tell quite how they related it to CPI, if it was just what it was at that time, or if they did some kind of average over the 5 years. That I don't have that information on. But yes, it only increased on those intervals, not every year.
Okay, so the inflation, did that help you negotiate it up that high, or they just hadn't had a huge increase for a while?
Yeah, they hadn't had a huge increase for a while.
And we, we looked at this is a common practice, so you don't have to stick a cell tower in the middle of a neighborhood. And so we, looked around to see what these leases were going for to make sure that we were in the market competitive range. And I would say we're in the market to slightly more competitive than market range with this lease at $3,000 a month, and then escalating at 3% per year.
Thank you. You did a great job.
Oh, thanks.
I think you answered one of my questions, which was how it compares with market. But the other question I have is, we've talked from time to time as a body about what we're required to do relative to communication equipment. We've gone with this option because the other option would be for them to erect a tower somewhere else in the city, which we would probably not have much choice on where that would actually go.
I would assume that they've designed their system based on the location of these right now, so it probably, without a massive modification to their system, they would probably choose to put a tower in the general vicinity where this tank is.
So it works best for both of us.
I think it works best for both of us.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any further comments? All right.
m-
No, go ahead, Marjan.
I'm sorry. How big is this lot?
So this is the, the overhead tower tank that we have, the big white elevated tank. So the antennas are mounted to that tank. So it's just on that tank, which is on that small lot that the tank is on.
Thank you.
All right. Can I get a motion for item 5D as written?
Was that Marjan?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay.
Need a second?
I'll second.
Perfect. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Water tower communication piece is carried. All right. We have no old business tonight. We'll shift to staff's choice. Item 7A, lead reduction program outreach.
Okay, so I'll be presenting the majority of this. Peter might jump in with little things here and there. I do want to just note, everybody on the board received an email today with this presentation and then the outreach materials that we've provided in the room tonight. So hopefully everybody saw that and can reference that in the future. But we'll go through these items as I go through the presentation. So we want to talk about two things here. So the program funding and then the outreach and strategy materials that you have in your hands tonight for the lead reduction program. So first, program funding, I'll just give an update on the drinking water revolving fund loans. So through the direct loan or the bipartisan infrastructure law bill money, the loan was for $17.6 million, and that includes $10 million of principal forgiveness at loan closing. The interest rate for that loan is 3.5% in a term of 30 years. The leveraged loan, that bond sale was successful on May 8th. So that the total loan was for about $22.6 million. The loan funds that are going to be deposited in our project account is $22.4 million. That difference there are issuance fees and the underwriting fees that are charged by the Colorado Water and Power Authority. That interest rate is 4.5%. The all-in bond yield for that bond was 5.29%, but we get a 15% discount through the drinking water revolving fund program. So that gives us our interest rate at 4.5%. Again, a 30-year loan, and these bonds were purchased by Raymond James and Associates.
So for comparison's sake, when we issued the WIFIA funds back in April and May of 2022, those came in at 2.89 and 2.95, I believe, right?
Yes, 2.98.
2.98. And so you can see, even in this volatile interest rate environment, that direct loan from the federal government is at 3.5%. And that's on essentially about $7.5 million worth of loan. So still a really good competitive interest rate considering our interest rate environment. The leverage loan at 4.5%, is a little bit higher, but it's still a strong lower interest loan for us given the state of interest rates today. So when we look at the loans we've been closing over the last 2+ years to put this funding in place, we're anywhere from 2.9 to 4.5 for all of that funding, which is, as a package, I think pretty strong for us as a utility for low interest loans.
Okay, so I just want to give this reminder of the designation between customer-owned and utility-owned piece of the lead service line, because that'll be important as we go through some of the funding aspects. And again, we are working on the designation where we show the meter. Right now it's shown at the curb stop, but after some discussion we had at council last week, we are working to revise that so that the meter then falls under the the utility-owned side of the service line.
Still to be purchased by the homeowner, but on the utility side.
Correct. So for a representative single-family lead service line replacement, these are the components of that cost. So on the customer side, we're anticipating, again, this is representative, typical installation, $2,600. So that would be the potholing and then the replacement of the copper service line from the meter to the home or the building. The utility side replacement cost is $4,700 and includes several other components. So there's initial mobilization of the contractor, potholing, the lead service line replacement, meter pit installation, and then asphalt patching and other utility potholing that might be needed in the area to make sure we don't interrupt other services. So that total is about $7,300 per lead service line. And so it's not showing fully with this. Can't get that little thing to go away. Oh, there we go. Okay. So our lead service line count, as we mentioned before, there's approximately 3,000 lines, which when I go to the next slide, that's how we get to these program cost numbers. So the assumed lead reduction program costs, and that's again assuming typical installation, so this number will change. But for tonight, I just wanted to show where the federal funds were going, what we were funding, and then what WIFIA might be funding. So the assumed lead reduction program cost, $27.2 million. So I'll go around the circle here on the blue area. That is that customer side lead service line replacement. So at 3,000 lines, that's about $7.8 million. And that's funded by our federal loans and loan forgiveness and principal forgiveness. And then moving to the next category, the green is program management. So we're estimating program for the entirety of the program, it's about $3.2 million in program management. So that's Hazen and Sawyer. That's other program management fees. There's an inspector, there's pitcher program, that kind of thing. It's all in that bucket. And then the next green area is the utility replacement costs. So residential lead service line replacement, we're estimating about $9.5 million for typical installation. There are a few customer lead service line replacements that we are projecting we'll have to do. Commercial. Sorry. How many? That
We're projecting about 300.
300.
Yeah,
So that's
commercial / multifamily.
okay. So commercial / multifamily. So that's 1.8 million. Other construction costs, we estimated at 2 million. So traffic control, additional line replacement if needed, if there's a damaged line during construction, things like that would fall under there. And that's all funded through the drinking water revolving fund loans and the BIL loans. And then there's a small chunk here for WIFIA, 2.9 million. That's for the meter pit installations through our WIFIA loan. We allocated funds for meter modernization, so that falls into this category, and that's why it's separate from the program costs related to the drinking water revolving fund loans.
And this is where the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law money is critical for us, because that $10 million of principal forgiveness is because we are a qualifying community for that maximum amount of $10 million. I know Greeley also just was recently awarded, and they got the same 10 million. And so it's really good for our community to get that essentially grant money to address this issue for our customers. As you can see through the cost to help mitigate those costs that may have been a burden to them. So it's really it's good news for our customers, and it's good that we were able to qualify and receive that money. So it's a big deal for this program.
And so with the program cost estimated at 27.2 million, we just approved the $28 million program for just construction. We anticipate that number is going to change because they're not all going to be typical installations. There will be additional costs. We could potentially discover more lead service lines, things like that. So there will be additional program costs. But I just wanted to also get to a point that we have $40 million in loan and principal forgiveness. So how does that then relate to what might be left over for addressing other capital projects? So with this estimate, we would have $12.8 million left from that drinking water revolving fund loan.
Does that make sense? So our current estimates based on 3,000 lines is the program costs generally around 28 million plus or minus. So that leaves us 12 million left over from all these loans that we just closed that could potentially be available if we are right in our estimates of 3,000 to take care of some of our other problems that we have throughout the water system. So I think the next slide gets to this, right?
We got a quick
one
summary
more slide.
slide. So this is basically in table format, what we showed on the previous slide. So assumed program funding breakdown. So the funding source, what that's used for as a component of the program, and then that estimated amount. But then as a reminder, these were the current capital program, and these were the additional funding needs in the pink. And so that leftover amount from that loan could go to address these pink areas that we've identified as gaps in funding currently.
Yeah, so and this is what we presented a few weeks ago. So the 6.4 million is the gap, the more immediate gap. And then if you look for the 28 to 32, there's about 11.5 million. So it's generally about 17 million based on what we project the next 9 years of needs to be based on the funding that we have. Well, if our numbers come in lower on these lead service lines, then we can use this loan that we've just closed with the drinking water revolving fund to significantly close that gap, and maybe through cost reduction in the cost of contracts, as well as refining scopes, and maybe we push some of this out a little bit further depending on how we implement. This could help us with that pink. And what that means is that if everything lines up well and our lead program doesn't exceed 3,000, which we think is a high estimate, and our program continues to implement through WIFIA and the other funding sources, with this remaining amount of about 12 million, we think the utility is well funded to continue to address the problems through about 2031. Which is essentially 7 years from now. That gives us 7 years to figure out then how to build that long-term sustainability for ongoing investment, so we don't fix all these things and then wait 20 more years and then have the same problem repeat. So it's good news in the sense that we think that we have time to fix this structural revenue problem such in a way that doesn't create any kind of shock to our customers and still keeps us very competitive in our rates and fees to our customers. So it's good news. This I was pleasantly surprised about when we started looking at the remainders of that DWRF loan and what it could be used for.
So are we still not having to make payments on these loans until we actually draw on the money? I mean, the pay interest?
So that's on the WIFIA. So you want to answer that?
Yeah, I will. So on WIFIA, correct, we do not, currently we have not drawn down either on the water side or the sewer side for either of the WIFIA loans. So we are not paying any type of interest or capitalizing interest at this point in time. For these, it's different. We start paying right away. We start paying interest right away.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, which is why it's good that so much of it's going to that lead program, because we're gonna be utilizing it right out of the gate as opposed to letting it sit there. The great thing on the WIFIA side is we are pushing that draw as far out as possible based on how our cash flow is working within the fund, such that we can maximize the time frame to have it available, not pay interest on it, and then pull the draw on it at the moment we absolutely need to minimize our interest.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the funding? The next is the outreach, so I can pause here if there's. Okay, outreach strategy and materials. So we are targeting the north central zone for replacements. So on the south side, that's Highway 285 up to Yale Avenue, and then South Broadway to Downing, going west to east. The replacement zone will begin construction at replacement zone in 2024, and we anticipate that we'll be able to complete that. The contractor will, however, pothole citywide, so that won't be just in this zone. Future replacements will have similar outreach to what we're going to discuss today. So this is a slide we've presented before, but this really summarizes what our outreach is and over this time frame and through 2024. So there'll be 4 mailings directly to customers that have a lead service line. There's 4 community events. We attended the first this last Saturday at Celebrate Inglewood. We had a lead reduction tent. We have scheduled 3 community meetings for this north central zone. And then once we get started with replacements, there will be continuous on-site meetings or on-site visits with customers, as well as door hanger notifications that construction is happening. So what that looks like by month, these are the various events and outreach materials that will be mailed out. So in May, like I mentioned, we went to Celebrate Inglewood. The LSLR announcement is going to go to every single customer, just letting customers know that this program is happening, and it mentions where we are focusing construction in 2024, and then gives resources to find more information online. And then the first mailing, and so this is part of the materials that we handed out. The first mailing will include a cover letter, the customer guide, and actually I'll go through these later. We don't have to look at them right now. I have slides for each one of them. And then we will attend neighborhood nights in May, which is a park that's within this north central zone. In June, we will attend the SPR Water Fest. If customers have not responded to our first mailing, they will get a second mailing. Then in July, there's the first in-person community meeting. On-site consultations will begin with those that have been scheduled for service line replacement, and then door hanger notifications will be posted around the same time. In August, if we're still not hearing back from customers, they will get a third mailing reminder, and then we'll continue with construction, so on-site consultations and door hanger notifications. In September, we have our second community meeting. We also will attend another neighborhood nights. That's at Bates Logan Park. That's also within that north central zone. And then we'll continue with on-site consultations. October, our final in-person community meeting for that area. And again, meeting with customers as we are performing construction in October and November.
So on this, I think hopefully it's clear to the board that we are trying to cover all bases to contact people on this program. And we hope that it goes smoothly for everybody, fully anticipating that there may be some circumstances that something doesn't go right or something doesn't get delivered right. If you run across anything like that, please get it to us as fast as possible so that we can correct it as soon as possible to minimize any negative effect to our customers on this. We are trying to reach them, but we know it's not perfect. And if there are incidents, the sooner we know about them, the sooner we can get them corrected. And if we start seeing a pattern of incident, then we can change potentially or further supplement our approach. We just had this where I got an email from a customer who was using the website and it was linking to the wrong map. And we replicated it and have subsequently fixed it. So if they were experiencing it, it means other people were probably experiencing it, but we didn't know people were experiencing it until they brought it to our attention. So I'm really appreciative of the fact they brought it to our attention. Also recognizing that.
I just need to step outside for a moment.
Sure. Also recognizing that we ended up with a change that needed to occur on that. So if you hear anything, please let us know.
How does, if you find an unsafe working condition fit into this process, would you come back to them later in the program and say, you have this amount of time to address, say, there's like a broken beam right above where they're working? What's the plan for that?
Yeah, so there's, those on-site consultations that happens prior to construction. And that's when a city representative and the contractor are there to do exactly that, to make sure that those working conditions are safe, that they have room to work and connect that service line into that first fitting.
And if it's not, do you provide a letter to them saying, hey, here's what needs to be fixed before we'll come in and do it? Or what's the plan there?
It's listed in the acknowledgement form, which would get reviewed during that on-site visit. So they'd say, we'll schedule your replacement, and if you don't address this to make it a safe working condition by the time your replacement is scheduled, then they will not perform the replacement.
Okay, so this is what the replacement notification schedule looks like for an individual that is getting their service line replaced. So approximately 45 days before a contractor would like to replace the service line, they'll get the mailing notice. If we haven't heard from them in 21 days, they'll get the second, and then in 7 days, the third mailing notification. That on-site visit could happen anytime between 7 and 21 days because it'll be happening frequently, so they'll know when they're scheduled, but it might be between that time frame that they have that consultation. Between 1 and 3 days, there will be a water shutoff posted on that customer that's getting the replacements. And then door hangers will be placed at neighboring homes and businesses, just letting them know that construction is going to be happening and when it's going to be happening. So for non-responsive customers, so we've reached out for separate times, we will then hang a notice on their property and ask that they respond to us within 1 to 3 days. If they do not, then we will replace the utility side service line and then leave the customer side service line.
What's that device that goes in between?
Dielectric coupling.
A dielectric coupling will be installed.
That'll be installed as well.
Thank you.
So now to the mailing and the materials that you all have in front of you. So the first item there is just our cover letter that goes with this customer brochure, customer guide, and the acknowledgement form. So that's that longer legal size piece of paper that we are then going to ask customers to read through. They'll be walked through it with the contractor and the city representative before the replacement takes place. We will need this signed by a customer before they can get their lead service line replaced. Should those materials not be returned to us, they'll get that reminder letter. I don't think we included that.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, we do have it in here, okay.
It's just, we're trying to reach you. It's very short.
Yeah, we're trying to reach you. I will note, and you'll see them on some of the materials, that we are adding a Spanish translation to the acknowledgement form and the cover letter, trying to, again, make sure we reach our population of customers and they're getting all the same information. We also have 2 billing specialists on staff that are fluent in Spanish, and so they can call us and we can walk them through these materials as well.
And the selected contractor has a 24-hour phone line that has Spanish-speaking operators as well.
If the coupling gets put in, does the utility still gonna cover the cost if it's within the 3-year period or beyond? If the property's sold, the owner's deceased, and they want the change after, or they just have a change of heart, what's the?
Yeah, all right, so we haven't necessarily made that policy decision yet. If the program's still going on and it's not too hard to remobilize to do it, I think we would probably consider it. And it also depends on volume. If we end up with, if we end up with a half a dozen of these over 2 years, and it's just easier to, someone comes in, it's easier for us to replace, I think we wanna replace them. If we end up with 100 of them, that might change. If we end up with 100, I think we got a different issue, but I would say right now, we haven't said no to that, but there is additional cost because it's remobilization. But it might be enough that it still falls within the program costs.
Do we know what Denver's seeing?
Actually, so do we know what Denver's doing as it relates to that?
They were coming back to homes that refused it the first time and asking the second time. They're trying not to do that anymore, Ty. They're trying to get them while they're mobilized in that neighborhood as much as possible. So they've changed their policy a little bit on that as time goes on, but now they're trying to into it.
Do you know how many, like, rough percentage-wise?
Yeah, so for the first few years, they were racking up a list of people who didn't want the replacement, and they got up to 1,000 properties that refused replacement, so they actually changed their ordinance and now use water shutoff to convince these people to say yes the first time. So very recent change. The list got very long.
And Denver's also under a different requirement than we are because they are regulatorily required to do this. So that's why they use the shut off to help people.
Yeah, we have a lot of control over our program stage, and why we're trying to get this addressed for our community in the next 3 years, while we still have a lot of that flexibility without the state saying you will do it this way, you will do it this way. Now, we're following all best practices. We're following very similar. We're not reinventing the wheel on this. We're trying to follow the best way that has worked and learn from their lessons and growing pains in this process. But ultimately, the ultimate goal is we want to get these lead lines out of the system. That's what helps our community. That's what helps our customers. That's what helps people from a health and safety perspective. So that's the overarching. How we get there is really, I think, dependent on how well we're interfacing with our customers on this.
So back to the number of in-person events. So the community meetings for the North Central Zone, we will have the contractor there, the inspector there, program staff there to answer questions for those that are specifically in that zone. But those meetings are open for anybody that wants to come ask us questions. It's kind of like a public meeting. So we'll have 2 of those at the Malley Recreation Center and then 1 here at the Civic Center. And then the community events, like I've mentioned, a couple neighborhood nights, and then the South Platte Renew event on June 20th. So for the on-site visits and door hangers, I've mentioned this, but the contractor will walk through, make sure it's a safe working environment, make sure they can access the points that they need to access, walk the customer through exactly what will happen, when their water will be out, when it's scheduled to happen, all of the details of the actual replacement day. They will also inspect that inside connection to make sure that they can make it without too many modifications, and then confirm receipt that the acknowledgement form has been signed or have it signed and collected that day. The customer will also be provided with flushing instructions for after that replacement happens. We just want to make sure that any debris or things that could get into their service line as a result of construction is flushed out through the system. So it walks them through that detailed process that they need to do inside their home once the contractor leaves. We're also developing a instructional video to be posted on our website so that customers can reference that as well. So post replacement, we will again provide the flushing instructions the day of construction, and then provide a pitcher if the customer chooses to take one that they can use for 6 months after replacement.
So this is a Brita filter that's certified to remove lead, and it's really just a precaution in case people want it. In theory, the lead is gone, and so this is just a last precaution just in case, to make sure that we're covering all of our bases as it relates to this.
If folks have filtration systems, are we providing money for replacing those filters, say like an RO or something else?
No, we weren't planning on that. We were gonna give them this, the filter and some filter packs to be able to utilize this during the post-construction period. If they've got an RO system or something like that, that's an independent system that they have internally to their home.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions or discussion?
So the materials that we provide tonight, they are mostly complete materials. There's a few things that we're just cleaning up before they're sent out to customers, but this is really to give you all an advanced copy of what your constituents will see so that you can answer questions or have, any additional information questions, you have that information for you in advance to help answer your questions. And then, like I said, we're always available to answer questions. We have a lead reduction email, and then that comes directly to our program manager. And then we've trained our billing staff to help answer general questions. If they don't get their questions answered, then we return the phone call.
So I just want to acknowledge the work that Hazen, our program manager, and Sarah have done to develop all of these outreach materials specific to Englewood. I feel like I've been reviewing outreach things for the last month and a half. But the package is finally here and it's consistent. It's really it's really great work on their part to pull all this together to inform our customers as much as we possibly can about this important program for our system. So I just want to thank you all for the great work on this.
I think Marjan has a question.
Peter, I was wondering if there is flexibility for the customers, like if it doesn't work out with they're going to be out of time or they have surgery or things of that nature. Is there flexibility with that company so they can skip them and then come back to them? Is there room for that?
I would say that there's some flexibility, but it's limited to the pricing is based on a production rate based on working in a street at a time. And so if they're in a street, where costs go up is if they do 90% of a street and then they have to come back and remobilize that street. So I think I'm hoping that because we have so much advance notice of where the contractor is going, that people will have time to be ready for that schedule. When they're actually within the street, I think there might be a little bit of flexibility, but it's hard for us to come back and dictate how they execute the work, because part of the reason why we're getting excellent pricing is because they've found a really efficient way to execute the work. So I'm not going to say that it's absolutely no, but I do want to be realistic that there might not be a lot of flexibility. There might be some though.
Well, yes, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate that. And you're right, the time frame will help for people to make plans as well. So
Yeah, hopefully they have enough advance notice so that they can accommodate this when the contractor gets to their street.
thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or
I have one.
comments? Go ahead.
So you wanted to move the meter from the customer side to the utility side. I'm assuming that's for convenience for repairs or?
It's, yeah, so it's convenience for access. So we want to move them out from within the
From yard.
house.
Or the house.
We want to move them out from the house and into a meter pit out in the yard. It gets
Okay.
us a much better access. It's much less disruption to the homeowner. And then when we look at the ownership divide, this is the last refinement as we've gone through this whole process, is really defining where that city responsibility stops and the homeowner responsibility starts. And in the ideal state moving forward, which is there's an outside meter pit, there's a new meter set within that. It's essentially everything from the meter pit to the street is the city's, including the meter pit. The customer pays for the meter because that causes the account to go active is that the customer. And then the pipe downstream of that meter connection all the way to the house becomes the homeowner piece. And so there becomes a really well-defined delineation of this is part of the city's system, essentially the last mile of that system, if you're thinking in supply chain stuff, analogy. And then that last piece is very well clearly defined and very simple, because at that point in time, all it is a pipe. So there's been a lot of concern throughout the city as it relates to curb stops. Curb stops are somewhat of a pain, and if we move to meter pits outside, then we would eliminate the curb stop, at which point we'd have a shut off within the meter pit, and it just makes things a whole lot simpler. And so that's a last step of refinement that we'll bring back to the council probably after we get this program going, to make sure that our final delineation of what's owner side versus what's city utility side versus what's customer side is really well defined and very simple, and I think appropriate for the utility and the customer.
My only other comment with that is that my husband and I have a property in Denver and built in 1947. And I don't even think it took them 6 hours to do everything. It was quick. They were in, they were out. They called us multiple times because we had cross wires with people living there. But it was taken care of in no time. And there were no issues. And they left the little Brita thing, and I don't even know if they used it. But I just want to tell people, as much as it sounds like you're pestering people to get this done, most people are like, as long as it doesn't really interrupt my day, please just go ahead and take care of it. And it was quick. It was very quick, and they were kind and they were nice, and bada boom, bada bing. So I want to encourage everybody, if you know somebody, tell them, please get it done.
And that's great feedback, because that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
And that's what we think. And I think Jasmine was at the booth on Saturday and said that the vast majority of people came up were actually happy because they were in that first zone, so we didn't have to say, we'll get to you next year. They were in the zone, and we're like, hey, in fact, we're gonna be doing yours first. So that's good. And it sounds like everybody was excited about it. Yeah.
Even the few people that we told were not in the zone, but may have led, when we told them less than 5 years, they were like, oh, okay, sounds good. So very positive.
Great. All right. No more last minute staff's choice, correct?
No, I think the last thing on this is what we're gonna move forward with, and just concurrence from the board that we're heading in the right direction, which I'm sensing, and we'll just keep moving forward.
Sounds good. Moving on to board members' choice, I'll just do the first one. I just want to acknowledge, as you know, Chuck hasn't been with us for a while. He's still on just a leave, Vice Chair Habernick. I've asked Ty to step in on an interim basis, so that if for some reason I'm not available for a meeting or whatever, you guys won't just sit there and wander in circles indefinitely. So Ty has graciously agreed to do that until Chuck is able to return, and hopefully that happens. That's it for me. Is there any other board member choices? All right, hearing none, then we are adjourned. Thank you all. Go, and I hope the rest of your evening is nice.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
They're not gonna take any leave of absence.
Yeah.